In these videos that are labeled PMO, spiritual warfare, I've been very, very eager to help men to understand that PMO is not only a human activity, and that is to say, a man who is a human is doing something human while he's doing the PMO process, but it's also a very supernatural thing going on as well. And what I mean by that is that we are told convincingly in the scriptures that when a man is doing PMO, for example, when he's involved in that process, the powers and principalities and demons and Satan and such are very actively involved in trying to get the man to begin, follow through, and finish the PMO process. And I have found 5 ways that the devil is actively involved from the beginning through to the end when a man is doing PMO. Number one, we saw in previous videos that Satan is the tempter, we are told. And what the devil does is he is able to present to a man in a given circumstance, certain environment. He lays out the bait, something that is attractive. A fishing term, obviously, a fish swimming through the water sees the bait. What's the bait? The bait is a worm. It's something to eat, or it's shiny. It looks like something seductive, and the fish begins to be lured in the direction of that bait. Well, that's what the devil does. The devil lays out that temptation and that piece of bait of the orgasmic thrill and experience that the man needs, or the calm that follows all of that. And so the devil lays out that the bait. Number one, he is the tempter. Number two, there are lies that are going on, lies that the man is telling himself. He sees the bait, his desires are stirred up. He says to himself, he lies to himself, hey, I need to do this. There's nothing wrong with doing this. I'll only do this once. I can't be happy in life without this. Those are lies. But those are lies that not only a man tells himself, but the evil one, who is also called the father of lies, is hammering a man also in addition to those with his own lies. The devil's presenting his lies as well. And then thirdly, concerning the lies, you add that man lying to himself, the devil lying to him, and that's a very, very persuasive lie. That's going to compel the man to follow through to going toward the bait, nibbling and chewing, and eventually eating the bait. And then thirdly, we saw that the devil is also a deceiver. And we're going to be looking at that actually today. So, what does that mean? When there's a great deal of deception that's taking place when a man does PMO. He sees the bait, he's lured in the direction of the sexual temptation and the sexual fulfillment that will come if he follows through. There are lies that are going on. But here's the interesting thing. The man who's done PMO 350 times, and 350 times he's always swallowed the hook. The bait never comes without the hook. When he swallows the bait, there's pleasure, there's calm, there's a thrill, there's a sexual ecstasy that's very compelling, very seductive and alluring. So he enters into that pleasure, but then subsequent to that, there's a hook. And what does the hook mean? Well, in the case of a fish, the fish eats the bait, swallows the bait, but it gets hooked by the hook. And that is to say that he is now dragged up, put in the bait or in the boat. He's unhooked from the bait and he dies. And eventually, that piece of fish is probably going to be that night's dinner on the part of the fisherman. But there's a bait, there's a pleasure. The bait tastes good to the fish, but it kills him. There's always a painful consequence. And now the fish does not know that there's a hook there, but whether he knows it or not, he eats, he gets hooked, and he dies. Now, the man who is doing PMO for decades, for 300 times or 400 times or 500 times he's done PMO, here's what happens. He sees the bait. He wants to enter into the orgasmic experience, the thrill and the calm. He lies to himself, and the devil's lying to him as he's proceeding toward nibbling and chewing and swallowing that bait. Now, the man who does PMO knows there's a hook. He knows there are painful consequences that he has faced 400 times after he has done PMO 400 times. What's the hook? What's the consequences that the man faces? There's shame, there's guilt, there's condemnation, there's remorse, there's the painful consequences. What happens if he hides this from his wife? Can he live with himself? Or even more so, what happens when he has to go back to his wife and say to her that he has committed sexual sin? Uh, what will that do to her? What will that subsequently do to him? The hook is very, very, very painful. The man has entered into those painful consequences 400 times. And he's moving toward doing it 401 times. Is he aware there's a hook? He's aware that there are consequences, but it's very fleeting. He knows, he remembers that there's a hook and there are painful consequences, but it's probably no longer than that. But why doesn't it last longer? Why doesn't he stop? Why doesn't he ponder? Why doesn't he explore that more deeply? Why doesn't he think about that in the process? Well, there's a deception that's taking place in this third step of the process of PMO. First of all, the man knows there's a hook and there's consequences, but it's fleeting because he deceives himself. In 1 John chapter 1, it says this in verse 8. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. Now, this is not a passage about PMO, but it is a passage about the fact that we can deceive ourselves regarding life and circumstances and consequences and such things. Yes, we can very, very much deceive ourselves regarding any matter in life. So there is this capability, and this capability of deceiving ourselves regarding PMO is very actively involved. The reason why that fleeting thought is only fleeting is because when it comes into the man's mind, he deceives himself. He hides his eyes concerning the truth about the consequences. He doesn't listen to himself. He denies. He covers his ears so he cannot hear about the hook. There is a deception and a turning away from that truth, hiding it, suppressing it, pushing it down, all in the process of deceiving himself about the fact that there's a hook. He's very capable of doing that, and it's very powerful when he does it. But there's a second form of deception that takes place. Or in other words, there's a second source of deception that's taking place when the man is doing PMO, and that is the devil is deceiving the man as well. Do you remember Genesis chapter 3 when Adam and Eve sin and God comes to them and says to the wife, "What have you done?" What does the wife say to the Lord when asked that question? What she says is, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." The devil, who was the serpent, deceived me. He hid from my eyes the total consequences of what the hook is really going to be about if I eat this fruit that I was told not to. He deceives me. He hid that from me. He blinded me to that. He veiled that so that I could not see what the reality was really going to be like. And she was deceived by herself, I think, but clearly she was also deceived by the Satan, who was hiding and lying and veiling the terrible, awful consequences that God warned Adam and Eve about if they were to eat of the fruit that they were commanded not to. But he had the ability to hide it from her. And so so that's a second source of deception when a man is doing PMO. Not only is he actively involved in deceiving himself, but secondly, the devil is also very powerfully deceiving him as well. And there's a third source of deception, and that is when you add the two of those together. It's a very powerful delusion and form of deception that hides the consequences that will surely come to pass if one takes the bait. There's always a hook. But it's only fleeting because we're deceiving ourselves, the man's deceiving himself, and Satan's deceiving. Those two together are very, very powerful in hiding from the man. The 401st time, that is going to be very, very painful if he doesn't stop, turn around, and run away with God's help. But rather, if he proceeds, then there's going to be very painful consequences, which the man hides from himself and deceives himself, and Satan deceives him as well. Remember also in Revelation chapter 12, we're told that the devil, there's a description of him here in verse 9. The great dragon was hurled down, that serpent called the devil or Satan, who deceives the whole world. Wow. Satan has the ability to deceive and is actively involved in deceiving the whole world. Remember what he does to the unbeliever. We're told that the unbeliever is blinded by the devil to understand the truth, to see the truth about God and about the gospel, and to come and draw near to God by faith and repentance. The devil blinds the unbeliever to the gospel truths that he might be saved. He blinds the unbelievers. He deceives believers as well, as we've made a case here in this matter of PMO. Now, there's a fourth way. That's the third way in which the devil's very, very much involved in the PMO process. There's a fourth way, and there's a fifth way as well, and we're going to look at those in subsequent videos. In the next video, though, we're going to talk about one more way in which a man is deceived in the process of doing PMO, and I look forward to talking to you and showing you that the next time that we get together.